Hi everyone, this is Josh, and it's time to talk about The Last of Us, or the second half of The Last of Us, since I already reviewed episodes 1 through 5. You can find the link in the description to that video, or where my head is right here. Because I already gave all the background on what The Last of Us is, and the video game it's based on, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into talking about episodes 6 through 9, and give you my final thoughts and grade on the first season, along with grades for each episode. Let's do it! Overall, I thought the second half of the first season was pretty solid. There's an understandable change of pace after the madness that was episode 5. Things slowed down a bit, and it kind of feels like a western in episode 6, where Joel and Ellie are wandering through Wyoming. There's some amazing shots of them traversing this beautiful landscape. There was that drone shot of like that snowy bridge where you could see a production crew member in like the bottom left area of the screen. That was kind of embarrassing, but shit happens. You miss stuff when you're an editor or a DP or a director, and the cinematography has been so great up until this point. I don't think it's a big deal. I like the comedic element that they add to that first dialogue scene when Joel and Ellie encounter two local Wyomings, or is it Wyomingians? The older man walks into his cabin with Joel pointing a gun at him, and the lady who lives there clearly has already talked to Joel, doesn't feel threatened by him, and is just checked out of the conversation. The world building continues after the scene when Joel and Ellie find Tommy in the city of Jackson, which is this well-functioning commune that's run by Tommy's wife. Most of the episode at this point is dedicated to character development, with some great dialogue scenes with Joel and Tommy and Joel and Ellie. There have been some really sad moments so far in the show, but the argument scene between Joel and Ellie just destroyed me. That same scene from the game is one of my favorite cutscenes ever, and the tidal wave of nostalgia I got from it is probably a big part of the reason why I cried like an infant. As soon as they played the theme music right as Ellie brings up Sarah, I was fucking done. The waterfalls were streaming and I was just emotionally incapacitated. On the surface, it seems like a simple scene where Ellie wants Joel to take her to the Fireflies because she knows him, she's comfortable with him, and Joel wants Tommy to do it instead. But what's really happening in the scene is Ellie, more or less, is asking Joel to be her father, to make that commitment, and Joel doesn't want to do that because he's afraid he's going to get hurt again. This is the tipping point of their relationship where it could go one way or the other, and Joel tries to detach from Ellie by being hurtful, but deep down he's just scared and he's trying to mask it with this rough exterior that he's had for 20 years. Ellie understands this, which is why she doesn't give him shit the next day after he decides last minute that he will take her and not Tommy. This is a great episode that doesn't need big action scenes because there's so many great dialogue scenes, and it's one of my favorite episodes of the season easily. I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. Episode 7 is similar to episode 3 in that it gives us a standalone flashback story. This time it's about Ellie and her time in Fedra school, her relationship with presumably her first love, Riley, and how they both got bitten. Ellie recalls this memory after it looks like she's leaving Joel to die, who gets stabbed with the end of a broken bat in episode 6. It's a sweet episode and checks a lot of boxes in terms of character development, backstory, world building, and tension. The last 15 to 20 minutes feels like a horror film after we see that zombie who can hear Ellie and Riley in the distance, and we're just waiting for the moment for it to show up and ruin everything. Unfortunately, I do think this episode feels a little fillerish, mostly because I don't think it says anything that other episodes haven't already said. Every homophobic piece of garbage can talk all the shit they want about episode 3 being this woke filler that doesn't advance the story. Episode 3 condenses the most important themes of The Last of Us while also foreshadowing what's going to happen with the main character. It also fits neatly into the present story by not interrupting any major plot points or story developments. Episode 7 doesn't really weave its flashback into the present story as well. And because it's so long, it feels like it's mostly derailing a lot of the momentum from episode 6. It's by no means a bad episode, but it's very far from being one of the strongest ones. I'm gonna give it a light 6 out of 10. Things pick back up again with episode 8, where Ellie encounters this guy, David, who's this authoritarian sort of cult leader in charge of a group of cannibals. One of my main criticisms of the show as a whole is that I think it's been a little tame when executing some of the more violent elements of the story. I talked about this at length when discussing episode 5. This is the first episode where I felt like the show wasn't afraid of brutality. They gave Troy Baker an amazing send-off by casting him as the guy that takes a meat cleaver to the neck in a medium close-up shot. I saw all the blood I wanted. It was amazing. Thank you, Craig Maizin and Neil Druckmann. And I was very impressed with Bella Ramsey's performance during the scene where she breaks David's finger and taunts him after having her face smashed into the cage that she's being held in. Bella Ramsey's already proved me wrong once about being able to play this character from the get-go, and even though she did prove me wrong, I was still a little worried that she may not be able to execute part 2 of the story, because Ellie is different in that game. She's way more vicious and way more depraved. This scene proved to me that, yeah, Bella Ramsey's probably going to be able to pull off Ellie from part 2. Love the dialogue scenes between her and David. I felt like this character got a lot of development in the very short period of time that we see him. Running into a cannibalistic cult in an apocalypse is a very familiar idea, but I think the show is able to use it to further explore themes of violence and losing your humanity. This character David tries to justify his lack of humanity by telling himself there's a spiritual element to his survival. He kind of turns cordyceps into this deity by saying that it feeds and protects its children, it secures its future through violence if it must. This line communicates how a person who isn't physically infected with cordyceps has become emotionally or mentally infected and allowed this harsh world to corrupt their humanity. A reality that Ellie is clearly struggling with, and something that Joel is scared of, which we saw in episode 4. And when she brutally murders David at the end of the episode, you start to wonder if David was right when he said that he and Ellie are similar in how they have violent hearts. David is just a good example of a well-written villain. He says things that you can kind of agree with. There's a part when Ellie is talking to David where she says that you're a sick f***, you eat people, and she's right about that, but he kind of makes a valid point when he says, these people are hungry and we're in an apocalypse. We can't find food, so what else are we supposed to do? To be clear, I'm not saying just because you're hungry you should just resort to cannibalism, okay? Episode 8 is just a solid episode and another example of how the show has been able to retain the integrity of the part of the game it's adapting while adding more necessary detail. My only gripe with this particular episode is that I wish it would have been a little longer. I think because of that 1-hour episode format, it feels a little rushed. I would have specifically liked to have seen more of the town David leads and the characters in it, which we didn't see as much as I thought we could have. It's a solid episode though, I really liked it, and I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. And that brings me to episode 9, the season finale, which, I gotta be honest guys, I was a little disappointed by it. It's faithful to the source material, but doesn't give itself nearly enough time to stick the landing, which I'll talk more about in a little bit. There are moments in this episode that I enjoyed watching, like the flashback to when we meet Ellie's mom, played by Ashley Johnson, who is the voice of Ellie in the game. We meet her as she's in labor being chased by a zombie, probably one of the worst scenarios imaginable, and I'm guessing the mother getting bit right as she gives birth to Ellie could explain Ellie's immunity. Maybe some of the cordyceps transferred to her, but not enough for it to completely manifest. Ashley Johnson is very good in this short scene. We get to see her kill an infected with Ellie's switchblade, which felt like the most appropriate fan service we could have got. There's some interesting symbolism there with the original Ellie playing the mother of Ellie and birthing the character into existence. It's like this really weird rebirth of sorts. But outside of that flashback and the giraffe scene, which I enjoyed, the show does not effectively build up to its climax, which is only mildly satisfying at best. I don't know how I felt about the show's approach to Joel's Firefly killing spree. The entire action scene is cut to music and turned into a slow-mo montage of kills, taking a lot of the impact away for me. Myself and everybody else who has played the game knows how this ends, but at the same time, I feel like the show could have at least tried to make it seem like Joel may not accomplish his mission and he may not reach Ellie. and he may get killed while fighting these fireflies to add some suspense. Did I say fireflies? I meant fireflies. Oh, I can't speak. I think the show could have ditched the music and let some of the violent gunfights play out in real time. The way it's executed makes it seem like, well, there's no stopping Joel. He's gonna kill everyone in his way, and that's it. This opinion could be stemming from my hyper-violent gamer brain instinct, and maybe I'm asking for too much here for a television show, but I think my opinion is also influenced by one of the core issues I've already brought up. This show felt a little soft at times with its violence and action in this first season. The showdown with Marlene and Joel is handled decently. Both Pedro Pascal and Merle Dandridge, who is perfectly casted as Marlene, give great performances. This scene cross-cuts with the scene of Joel and Ellie in the truck driving back to Jackson, and it flows okay, but at the same time, I wouldn't have minded if these scenes just played out in their entirety uninterrupted from one to the next. Jumping to the truck scene before this showdown has concluded really saps some of the tension of that scene because we know Joel gets away at that point. This episode was just very rushed. It's only 43 minutes long compared to the average length of each episode, which is about 59 minutes. It feels like it's trying to set the record for how quickly a few plot points can be communicated before the credits roll. I really feel like an extra 17 minutes or even another episode would have been necessary to build a more meaningful and developed ending. Even though episode 7 is one of the more fillerish episodes for me, it still is better than the finale for the simple fact that it patiently told a story and gradually builds up to its climax. Episode 9 just feels like it wants to be done with the first season, and I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. Even though I did find the finale to be a little bit of a letdown, I still think season 1 was very good and very competently made. The 8 episodes that come before episode 9 were all really well done for the most part, with maybe just a few issues here and there, and the more I've thought about even some of the other episodes I didn't like as much, like episode 7 and episode 2, I think I've come to appreciate them more, especially now that we've gotten a more lackluster episode with episode 9. This show single-handedly has shattered the stereotype of video game adaptations often being mediocre. I think this TV show has even kind of like laid a roadmap for how video game adaptations can be more successful in the future. I'm looking forward to season 2. I'm currently playing through Last of Us Part 2 right now and having a great time. I think the game is great. I know a lot of people hate it, but I think it's excellent. I can't say that I'm excited for the discourse about the story of Part 2, which will probably be just as toxic and annoying as it was back when the game came out in 2020. Every episode is probably going to get review bombed when Dina shows up because there's a contingent of fans of these games that think gay bad, gay horrible, gay wrong, gay evil. I'm going to review bomb anything even remotely LGBTQ+. As we observed with the IMDb score for both episode 7 and episode 3, I find that very funny because the gayest episode in the show was the best one, which segues perfectly into my final episode ranking. My order from best to worst goes episode 3, episode 1, episode 6, episode 5, episode 8, episode 4, episode 2, episode 7, and episode 9. My final score for season 1 would probably be a high 7, but it's so close to an 8 that I'm just going to go ahead and give it an 8 out of 10. The final episode definitely does bring the score down significantly, but those first 8 episodes really are good television, and as time has went on, I've come to appreciate some of the episodes I didn't like as much, including episode 2 and episode 7, which I felt were sort of fillerish. But what are your thoughts on the first season? Did you like it? Was it disappointing? Was it faithful to the game? Did you review bomb it because you're an anti-gay troll? What did you think? If there's anything you would like me to review in the future, let me know in the comments section below. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications so you can know when I drop the next video. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time. It's been fun doing this. Take it easy. Bye.